It looked like somebody was bent over and had their head in the window of the deer blind. It either heard me or smelt me, and he pulled his head out of the tent and stood straight up, and that shocked me. They don't make people that big.
The way it moved, almost as if it was gliding across the beach. I've never seen anything move like that in my life. They were screaming at each other in gibberish. It sounded like a language, and they were chuntering away back and forwards, back and forwards, back and forwards. I know what a bear looks like, and there is no way on this planet that what I saw were bears.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Zia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
This is Susie from Southern California. You are listening to my favorite show, Sasquatch Chronicles.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you. We're going down to California, Old Cali, and we're going to be chatting with Nate. And Nate had an encounter back in 2007. He was out night fishing on the Kern River, and I'll kind of let him go into it. And Nate and I were talking the other day, and he was telling me about this near-death experience he had, and I asked if he would share it with us tonight. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And if you get a chance to check out sasquatchchronicles.com, you can become a member and get additional shows. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Nate to the show. Nate, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thank you, Wes.
Yeah, thank you, Nate. And I know we're going back to 2007 out there in California. If you would just start from the very beginning, kind of what were you doing and what happened?
Okay, Wes. In 2007, it was during the summertime. We like to go fishing in Kern County. And, it was me, my brother, and my friend. And we thought, since the summer, the days were hot, that we're going to go fishing at night. So we grabbed our gears. We decided, hey, let's not go too far into the canyons, and let's just fish at the first one or two spots that we see. That's what we did. We head out around midnight out to the spots. We started fishing. We used chicken liver, and we must have caught about 6 fishes. And because, we were putting it on the stringer, and we put it away. At first, we heard it sounded like an animal that we couldn't describe. I've heard animals out in the wild many times before, and this was something that we have never heard. And we never really gone fishing there at night. Everybody goes there during the daytime for a picnic or whatnot. But we heard this roar, and we're like, wow, could that be a mountain lion? But, it didn't sound like a mountain lion, and it had this deep tone to it. But we kind of ignored it, and we kept fishing. And, it wasn't a dark night. There was a lot of moonlight out because we didn't have to use our headlamps. And, once we heard that roar, we felt like an instant fear because it vibrated through us. I don't even know how to explain it. I know some people describe when they go visit a tiger or a lion, when it roars, you could feel it. Well, this was not close to us, but we definitely felt instant fear. And then we all noticed across the river by a tree, there was this thing that just stood up, and it was all black. And it must have been 9 to 10 foot tall, because from where we're at to where the creature was, it must have been like, I could say 40 yards, 50 yards away. It was bipedal. At first we thought it was a bear standing on its hind legs, but it was too big to be a bear. And the way it was built, it was more like they say, like a linebacker, big shoulders. We looked at it, and just for a split second, it proceeds to like push this tree. And when I say push this tree, this is a big tree. The circumference of the tree, I would probably say about 36, 40 inches. It's a big tree. And when he pushes it, it snapped. And when it snapped, it echoed throughout the canyon. And that's when we need to move. We need to do something now. I grabbed my knife. I cut my fishing line because I wasn't going to wait to reel it in. As I was cutting my line, my brother and my friend turned to me, ran to me with their fishing lines. So I cut those off too. And as I'm cutting that off, this thing jumps into the river. And Wes, in Kern River, there's a lot of people that pass away. There's a sign that's posted on the entrance of the river to be careful. I think it has over 300 drownings. This summer, there's already been 4 or 5 drownings in this same river. And the way it came through the river, it looked like it was swimming because it's deep at that end where the river is cutting through. But it looked like it didn't have any resistance. Like the water, I don't even know how to explain it. Like it's like the water didn't matter to it, and it was making way towards us. And that's when, I grabbed my gun, my keys, and I told everybody, hey, we got to run to the car. And so we left our things and we ran to the car, West, jump into our Lexus. And I must have been going 70 miles an hour out of that canyon. Yeah, it was terrifying.
Yeah, I bet. Nate, you guys are out there fishing with the boys and this thing shows up, and this thing's relatively close. I realize you guys are on the other shore, but it sounds like this thing's really close. I mean, what's kind of going through your mind at this point?
It was almost directly across from us from the river, and the river at that point, it must have been only like 40, 50 yards across, but it goes deep, about probably 30, 40 feet deep at where he was standing at. And that's why it didn't make any sense to me, Wes, because it seemed like he was walking across the river, not really swimming, but I know it's deep there. So, my mind kind of froze because I was trying to figure out, what am I looking at here? It was something we never expected. And me, my brother, and my friend, we've hunted, we fished. It was weird, Wes. I can't even describe you the unnatural fear that it gave us. And we have firearms with us for protection. Ever since I got shot when I was younger, I always carry a firearm now with me. Yeah, Wes, this was not human. I don't.
Yeah, I hear you. It's hard to find the right words sometimes. And that roar that you heard, it gets reported a lot. A lot of times people report hearing that roar and it sounded to them like a lion's roar. And I've heard it and I would agree with that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. If I could describe it's weird. It sounds like 3 or 4 animals at the same time roaring. Of course, it has that like lion, tiger sound to it. Then it carried like a deep, I don't know, like a ox sound to it. It was strange. It had like 2 or 3 sounds coming out at once, if I could say that. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. A lot of eyewitnesses will report that, they'll hear what sounds to be 2 or 3, 4 or 5 different vocal cords all going off at once. And it can be, and I've heard that before, it can be very disorienting at times. This creature, it knocks over a tree, starts coming across the river. Do you think it meant you harm?
Oh, yes. When we saw it stood up, it sort of kind of told us, hey, I'm here. When it pushed down the tree, I took it as an aggressive act, almost like a warning, like someone just, shooting up in the air. But then when it jumped into the water, that's when I knew it was coming towards us. And there's nothing good that could come from this. I don't know about, I heard people talk because after this incident, it cracked open this unknown for me. And I had to research and try to understand what this was. But, I've heard people talk about this thing being friendly and stuff, but I didn't get that.
Yeah, it didn't seem like it. The way it was coming across that water, knocking the tree over, and then on its way over. It sounds very, very territorial to me. Did you guys ever go back to this location?
Believe it or not, Wes, over here, so once we had this encounter, there was another place. There's Upper and Lower Richbar. So we decided to go to the other spot. This must have been like 2 weeks after this incident. So we decided to go to, I believe it was Upper Richbar. Same thing, Wes. We kind of forgot about, I don't even know how to explain it. It was intriguing, the experience we had. So we were wondering if there was other crazy experience we might encounter, but we weren't looking forward to it. But we went to the same area. And this picnic ground is about a couple miles from the last one. Same thing. We went fishing for catfish at night. Brought our gears. I had to buy new gears, new fishing poles. And this encounter was different, Wes. I don't even know how to explain it, but we're fishing. We caught about, 3 fish. We put on a stringer, same time frame, around 12 midnight. We sat together, and this time, because of the last incident, we decided to bring out something a little bigger for protection. So my buddy had a shotgun. I still carry my pistol with me, and my brother has his pistol. And so we had it with us as we're fishing. At first, we heard this sound, and it sounded like rats. I don't know if you heard forest mice, if you ever gone camping at night, and you kind of hear them like running around on the leaves. You can hear the leaves moving. So, I asked my buddy, same friend, and my brother, I'm like, hey, guys, hear that? They're like, yeah, it could be forest critters. It's nighttime. We're in the forest. So we think nothing of it. But the sound of this leaves moving, now it starts to encircle us. So, imagine you're fishing and now you're hearing leaves like all around you, like somebody's walking around you. So I'm like, hey guys, you hear that? I'm like, yeah, that's weird. But that didn't really scare us. What scared us was when we heard tongues. I know it's going to sound crazy, but what we heard was like somebody whispering. They were saying something, but we couldn't understand it, nor can we pinpoint the location it was coming from. It got to the point, Wes, that this was more frightening than the other incident, because it felt like it was right near us. What we did instinctively, me, my brother, my friend, we put our backs together, Wes, and we pointed our guns out. And I yelled out, I go, hey, if anybody's playing a prank, this is not a good time to be pranking around. But it didn't stop, Wes. As a matter of fact, that fear that we felt from that roar, that instant fear, we had that same fear come over all three of us. And we just got up and our backs together and we slowly walked towards our car and we left that spot. So the next day, I wanted to come back, retrieve my gear, because I've lost now, my gear twice now. So I go back early in the morning, around 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. I bump into the forest worker or the park rangers there. And I happen to ask, I'm like, hey, I forgot my fishing poles, my gear. And by any chance, do people come here at night and have strange stories to tell you? The park ranger tells me, he looks up at me, he goes, Nate, this part right here is where we pick up all the dead bodies that drowned in the river. And usually the river turns right here at the bend. This is where we grab the bodies. And least to say, I've never gone back fishing at night in the Kern River ever since those 2 incidents.
Yeah, that park ranger sounds like a blast to hang out with. This is where we get the dead bodies. I'm sure he's a lot of fun to be around. The noise that you describe, it kind of being all around you. I experienced something like that in Texas where something was screaming at us and it felt like it was all around us. I mean, I couldn't really pinpoint where it was coming from. I would say east, and then if you sat there for 5 seconds, you go, no, it's coming from the west and it's coming from the north. It just felt like it was on top of us. It's very bizarre how the sound kind of bounced everywhere. And I've been in the forest and was a hunter for many years, so I get all that. But this was very different. When you guys went back, was it a little bit of curiosity?
Yes. And, we were, when we went back the second time, we were curious, like, what is that thing? No one ever talks about that in Bakersfield, or we haven't heard that, from anybody else, because it was kind of weird, because once you get on the 178 going up to Lake Isabella from Bakersfield, you go into the canyons, you'll see these little picnic areas. And during the daytime, people use it. And, we try to go at nighttime. We didn't want to be bothered by other people. And we want to catch catfish because they're there at night. And when we had the first incident, we were kind of intrigued, curious, because what is this? Then it dawned on us, this is the thing I think people talk about, that's Bigfoot. This could be it, because once we did our research, we're like, well, they do snap trees, and that's what it did. It pushed that tree down, and this tree was not dead, Wes. This tree was, it was alive. The way it snapped is like when you took a fresh branch and you snap it, that's how it snapped.
Yeah, and you hear them do that all the time. And I think that sort of behavior is meant for, it's meant to make you go away. It's meant to terrify you. And they do a good job of it, especially when it's right in front of you, kind of like how you were. It definitely will make you want to leave. And that's why I always say with curiosity, I get the whole curious thing. I get why you guys went back. But I always use that caution, man. Be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. And, this whole situation, I wanted to ask you, how did this change your life, or did it?
This was first series of events that changed my life. I mean, the first series of events that changed it is when I had my near-death experience, because that opened a whole can of worms that I weren't, expecting. I used to come from this belief that, once you die, you die. You're born. I believe in the atheist ideas, I believe. But, once I had my near-death experience and I realized, hey, there is something else out here. There's a spiritual side to things. I think that kind of opened up my mind to, I guess, these other things that happen.
Yeah, I would really love to hear about the near-death experience. I think as we get older, we focus more on, okay, we're not going to live forever. I think by the time you hit 30, you start to realize you can die. And I'm fascinated by these near-death experiences. If you would, tell me about it. What happened?
Back in around early 2000s, I was going to college, and I was having some problems with the gas, driving back and forth and paying for my college books. So I decided to sell my Honda Civic. I bumped into this guy at a gas station, and he liked my Honda Civic and he wanted to buy it. And I told him when I, decide to sell it, I'll sell it to him. So, I give him a call. We meet up. He test drives the car. And to give you a little context, it came out, I guess, during trials and whatnot, that I guess this gentleman robbed another guy a week before. He test drove my car. I didn't know anything of this. He was just a random person that wants to buy my car. And so we test drive, we come back, he decided he wants to buy it. We were going to sign the pink slip and he was going to transfer the money to me. So as we're driving to his house, I'm making a U-turn to park in front of his house. As I'm parking in front of his house, and, he's already out of the car. I didn't know at that time why he was out of the car, but he was already out of the car. And, I turn the car off. I get out and I'm about to close my door, but I catch my seatbelt so it doesn't get caught between the door jamb. As I'm doing that, I can hear footsteps. So I turn to my right and I see this guy coming up to me. He must have been 2 arm lengths away, Wes. And I remember he lifted up his shirt and he pulled out a handgun and he shot at me. He shot at me about like 5 times. Each shot that he shot, I remember seeing the flash, the muzzle, and his face kind of just burning an image in my mind. And, after he shot me, my instinct was to get in the car, slide back in, start and try to drive to the hospital. So I get in the car, I'm starting it up and I put it in drive. And then I realize I can't breathe. So I parked the car. I only drove probably like 3 car lengths from where I was. And I could see the guy running away. So once he's ran away, I'm honking the horn. I'm calling for help. And I get out of the car. I only went down 3 car lengths away from where I was. I happened to park in front of a nurse's house. She runs out. She brings in, bringing towels. I mean, she comes out, she sees me, she calls her, I guess her family member, bring towels, and she's trying to put pressure because the bullet went through my lungs. It penetrated my lungs. I had a collapsed lung. It was going through some of my organs. I was choking on my own blood. So as I'm laying there, I'm having all these thoughts go through my mind. I'm never going to graduate. I'm never going to go visit Europe. I'm having these crazy thoughts go through my mind. And the ambulance finally came. When the ambulance, it felt like an eternity. When the ambulance came, you always see the movies where the guy asked the ambulance, and he the ambulance driver or the paramedic will always respond, "You'll be all right." So I asked him, like, "Hey man, how does it look?" And he looked at me, Wes, and told me it doesn't look good. Right then I knew I was in deep trouble. And once I got they got me through the ER. I remember my consciousness never faded. It was one stream of consciousness. Like if you were awake the whole day, you didn't go to sleep, and you know how your consciousness changed. It was one stream. So as I'm there on the things they're pushing you into the operating table, I remember counting backwards, and because she was telling me to count, and I was just remembering counting backwards, and boom, I felt like I was in space. Everything around me disappeared. What I thought was, for a second, I thought I was flying up. Then I realized I wasn't flying up. I was actually falling down. As I'm falling down, Wes, I get closer and closer to these lights. And these lights that I thought were stars are now not stars. They were actually eyes. I got to this place, and I could describe it as the bottomless pit. And I only describe it that because I felt the separation from God. I don't know. It was the furthest separation between me and God that there could possibly be. And as I'm there, I hear these demons calling my name. They're like, "Is that him?" They're saying all this stuff. And I hear the teeth grinding and the nails scratching against the rocks. And they started ripping me apart, Wes. It was weird because at this place, things seem more real than this world. If I could describe it, it's sort of like playing a Nintendo game, like, an 8-bit Nintendo game versus a 32-bit Nintendo game. It's a totally different place. But as they're ripping me apart, I got this, just deep sadness. And I remember this prayer I learned was Romans 10:9 in martial arts class, karate class. We always said it. And I was never a religious person, but now I'm experiencing all these things that the books talk about. So I said my prayer in Romans 10:9. And when I did that, Wes, there's this laser beam like light that came out of nowhere, and it hit me. And once it hit me, it started to open up. The light started to get bigger, and it started to surround me. And when that happened, all the demons, they went into the darkness. They couldn't come into the light. And once I was in the light, I felt this love that I can't describe in this world, the love he has for us. And when I got into the light, I realized it wasn't God that walked away from me. It was me that chose to walk away from God. It's like God never left me. And all this time I felt like I was alone. But in reality, I was walking away from God. And that was the message I got. And I just felt this love that brought me to tears, Wes. And as this light encompassed me, it started shooting me up. And I'm going up, and it felt like it hit warp speed. I'm getting all this information. And then some of the information I still remember. A lot of it I don't, because it's weird. It's sort of like once you're there, your mind understands things more. But, as I'm flying up, I get shot back into my body. And once that happened, it was still one stream of consciousness. I remember getting into my body, opening my eyes, and all these machines is just breathing for me and doing all these things for me. And that was my near-death experience.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing it. I know it's very personal, and what a terrible incident to go through, being shot and having to go through this, but what a fascinating account. What is Romans 10:9? That if you confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and that he's in your heart, he's God, and he was raised by God from the dead, you shall be saved, or something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing. It's been a long time. I think that's what it says.
It's very close. Yes.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've had a lot of people who've been in situations where they thought they were at death's doorstep. These creatures are surrounding them, and even poltergeist encounters, ghost encounters. You start throwing the name around Jesus Christ, and they seem to scatter. It's like some weird code in the Matrix. You know what I mean?
And that kind of opened me up to, mysteries in this world that I guess we weren't taught in school. After experience that thing over there in the Kern River Canyon, I looked into other people's experiences. I realized that, this thing, all the ancient cultures know what this was. They'll tell us it's a spiritual thing. If you look at the Tibetans with the Yeti, they'll tell you it's a spiritual animal, a spiritual being. If you look at China, the wild men of China, which is, basically Sasquatch, and they'll tell you it's an enlightened being. Even the Native Americans, so to me, it's more like a spiritual being that could, come into our reality or manifest itself and, do what it does to maybe, hopefully, I don't know, maybe open people up to the possibility of spiritual stuff. I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, and I wanted to know really what you thought. When you say spiritual being, do you mean a good spiritual being or a bad spiritual being?
I come to this conclusion that, we hear the stories of the Nephilim mating with females and creating these giants. Looking at these evidence and these experiences, I come to the conclusion that maybe these are just the spirits of these Nephilims that couldn't go to heaven and that they're just trapped here. And maybe that's why people experience these different wendigos and stuff. Maybe it's the same spirit, possessing an animal and having a different metamorphosis, or maybe it just manifests whatever it wants to manifest.
It could be. Yeah, for sure. I mean, you hear about these creatures doing a lot of really bizarre things that would not make sense for like a non-human primate. They can't do these things. And you do hear a lot of weird stuff. I want to ask you, going back to your near-death experiences, if you listen to a lot of people when they talk about going to heaven, they'll talk, they'll claim that they met God, they met Christ, they met loved ones, and then they had to come back. And what I find fascinating about this whole thing, Nate, is you were an atheist basically prior to being shot. And you didn't, there was no pearly gates. Peter wasn't there with a beer saying, hey, come on in. And, Uncle so-and-so is waiting for you. Or it wasn't like that. You ended up at the bottomless pit. What do you make of that? Do you think that was like a final test? I mean, you did throw out Romans 10:9. I mean, it is a powerful scripture, but what do you make of ending up at the bottomless pit is what it sounds like.
What was happening, Wes, is my parents were survivors of the killing fields. And I was born in Thailand. I came to the States when I was 3. So my parents didn't really know much about this country. And so I grew up in poverty. And, they were Buddhists, but I didn't believe what they believe. I didn't believe in anything, to be honest. So that brought me down to a dark path, being an atheist, which was, if this is one life and there's no repercussions on what I do afterwards, I'm going to get what I want, and I'm going to try to get as much as possible. And so that was my youth was, I didn't care about if I hurt another person's feelings or hurt them physically because I was an atheist. There's nothing, that could come from it. And so I got in a lot of trouble when I was younger. And but once I had that experience, Wes, it basically tells me like, yeah, there are repercussions to our actions. And what I got from it, I needed to see that place because I needed to see that, hey, the spiritual life is real. We're not a body having an experience. We're a spiritual being inside this meat suit that's having a human experience. And that's what I got out of from it is we're all spiritual beings having an experience here, and to learn, to live, and to forgive. Everything that we think is important in this life is not as important to God as you think. So if you're thinking like, yeah, this doctor degree, or I'm going to get the #1 song, or none of that's important to God. What I got from him was the most important thing is how we treat one another, because each one of us is a part of God. They try to tell you that, the kingdom of heaven resides in you. So, we all come from God. We're a part of him. And so ever since I learned that, I treat people different with the utmost respect, because now I see the enlightened being or the spiritual being or the God within them, instead of seeing them for, I guess, their outward appearances,
Yeah, it's beautiful, man. I really do appreciate sharing it. The Gospels in general, I know it's not a religious show. I don't know how we got off on this, but, the Gospels really it is a beautiful piece of writing. And if you take agenda and humans out of it, it's probably one of the most beautiful writings you've ever read. You coming from an atheist background, getting shot and having this experience is probably more powerful than any speech or sermon I've ever heard a preacher give.
I could tell you should be excited. I'm not too excited, but, seeing the other side, I could tell you is, I guess it's a more real place than this world that we're in. The more I look at it, the world that we're in is basically a classroom, and where we're here to learn what we need to advance our spiritual souls before we move on to the next stage. So this life is not the end all of things, but yes, we must do good and help each other out.
Yeah, it's a shame. You would think humans would just be that way, try to be good to each other, and reward or punishment at the end is irrelevant. Just try and do your best. But there's very few people doing that these days. And, the Sasquatch encounter was fascinating to me. But this experience that you had, when you were close to death, or it sounded like you did die a couple times on the table, is something that'll stick with me for a long time. And I know it's very personal. I really appreciate sharing that.
Hey, you're welcome, Wes. And if I could give a tip for everyone. And so if you ever want to talk to God, sit down and just hopefully he hears you out, but I'm pretty sure he will. So the best time is around 3:30 in the morning. I understand a lot of people will say, well, 3:30 in the morning, there's different, annotations to it. But around 3:30 in the morning, I find that's the best time to, pray and talk to God.
Yeah, I hear you. I know that it seems like I'm very religious. I'm really not. I know in Genesis it says that was God's favorite time of day, when everything was new. Very cool stuff. I appreciate you sharing what happened to you, man. I really enjoyed chatting with you, Nate.
Hey, you're welcome, Wes.
Thanks again, Nate. And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. If you get a chance to check out sasquatchchronicles.com, you can become a member and get additional shows. Until next time, everyone.